California, what a wonderful name, and a very old one, too. Did you know that Spaniards dreamed of finding a rich island called California long before they ever saw the land that we call California? The Spaniards were great explorers. They traveled over much of the Americas in search of gold and silver. One of the rich lands which they looked for was the island of California. The conqueror of Mexico, Fernando Cortés, in search of more gold, sent many to explore the Pacific coast. One reached the mouth of the Colorado River, and some Spaniards became convinced that California was not an island, but a peninsula. Another Spanish party, led by Melchior Diaz, reached the Colorado River, and Diaz became the first Spaniard known to have set foot on the soil of what is now the state of California. The Spaniards found many people living here, perhaps as many as 250,000 of them. We now know that the ancestors of the native Californians, whom we call Indians, had come from Asia about 20,000 years ago. The Chumash were an outstanding group of Indians. They lived along the coast from San Luis Obispo to Malibu. The smokes from these villages served to welcome many Spanish explorers. One of these explorers was Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, who sailed 2 small ships up the coast. His first stopping place in California was San Diego Bay. Cabrillo sailed along the coast as far north as Monterey, but he had an accident and lost his life. His men sailed as far north as Oregon, however, before they returned to Mexico. For the next 200 years, California was inhabited only by Indians. But Spanish galleons sailed across the Pacific, sometimes San Luis Obispo and Catalina Island. They carried valuable silks and spices, and sometimes were attacked by pirates. All that was left was a burning hull. The crew had abandoned ship. The pirates had taken the treasure and set fire to the galleon. Sir Francis Drake was the first pirate to sail along the coast of California. His ship was called the Golden Hind, and in it he hoped to explore the North Pacific Ocean. Just north of San Francisco Bay, Drake landed on the coast to repair the Golden Hind. The Miwok Indians were very friendly with their English guests. Drake was recognized as an important man. While his treasure was being heavily guarded, Drake set out to nail upon a post a brass plate proclaiming for all to see that California was claimed by England. Spain became alarmed over these pirate raids. Sebastian Vizcaino was sent to explore the California coast. He discovered the Bay of Pines and found it to be a good harbor, so much so that he named it Monterey in honor of the Viceroy of Mexico. By 1750, a new threat to Spain appeared from the north: Russian fur hunters. Off the Aleutian Islands, the Russians looked for the fur of the sea otter. In search of more sea otters, the Russians came south and later appeared off the coast of California. In Mexico, José de Galvez, a Spanish official, became worried. The Spanish Empire must be expanded to the north. Galvez not only used his own money to pay part of the cost of the expeditions, but he even helped load the ships which were to take supplies north. After a hard trip over land and sea, the expeditions reached San Diego. There, Captain Portola, first governor of California, along with Father Junipero Serra, founder of the California missions, said a prayer of thanks for their safe arrival. After establishing a fort at San Diego, Captain Portola went by land to Monterey with a small company of soldiers. The trip through Southern California was pleasant. The natives were gentle and friendly. The missionary friars presented small gifts to the Indians and at the same time told them about Christianity. Then Portola's expedition came across a strange lake. They were the first Spaniards to see the La Brea tar pits. Portola reported back to the Viceroy in Mexico. Here was a large amount of black tar that would serve many useful purposes. The rest of the trip was filled with hardships. The group became lost, and many were hungry. Portola was not sure that he had found Monterey Bay, so instead he continued northward and sighted for the first time San Francisco Bay. Portola later recognized Monterey Bay. There, after coming north, Father Serra sang Mass in celebration. The fort and mission of San Carlos was finally founded after more than 200 years of Spanish explorations. In Mexico, the Viceroy was so pleased that he ordered the ringing of bells throughout the land. California needed help. There were only about 70 Spanish-speaking people in all of California. Someone had to pioneer a new land trail from Mexico to Monterey. Juan Bautista de Anza, an adventurous captain, and Father Garces were chosen by the Viceroy to lead a land expedition from Sonora, Mexico. Upon reaching the desert, Anza's men and mules were slowed down by the shifting sand dunes. The entire group wandered for 6 waterless days, looking for the Indian trail Father Garces had followed 3 years before. But with the help of an Indian guide, they finally reached the shelter of San Gabriel Mission. Later, Anza led another large group of Spanish colonists all the way from Sonora to Monterey. Truly, it can be said that Anza's leadership and hard work saved California for Spain. But Spain did not rely on settlers alone. For them, the empire was based upon the conquest of Indians. The missions started by Father Serra brought Indians into the Spanish way of life and taught them how to do the work needed by the government. Almost all of the foods grown in California and most of the work was done by the mission Indians. The Padres hoped to teach the Indians Christianity, and they baptized many young children. One of the hardest working of the Padres was Father Serra. At the age of 70, he knew his work was coming to an end. One afternoon, in his room at San Carlos Mission, Father Serra died peacefully in his sleep. It was August 28, 1784. Father Serra's mission had come to an end. The gray-robed priest was mourned by all. His unselfish devotion for the Indians induced thousands of them to follow the Franciscan Fathers. Now, 9 missions stretched along the El Camino Real, from San Diego to San Francisco. They not only brought Christianity to the natives, but the Indians' labor fed and clothed the Spanish soldiers and priests. It was the Yankee sea trader and hunter who began to change things in California. The soft and shiny black fur of the sea otter was very useful and could be sold in China. But the sea otters were almost all killed by the fur hunters from the United States and Russia. Today, his life is protected by law. For a long time, the Spaniards feared that other Europeans would come to California, and they did. The Russians established Fort Ross just north of San Francisco. About 100 Russians and 80 Alaskan natives lived in the fort. The land was purchased from the Indians for 3 blankets, 2 axes, 3 hoes, and some beads. Later, the decline of the fur trade brought an end to the Russian colony of Fort Ross. Just when almost all of the Indians along the coast were under Spain's control, Mexico won her freedom. California became a part of Mexico. The Mexicans sent soldiers, and the Mexican flag was raised over Monterey. The missions such as this one were now to be churches, and the Indians were to become citizens of Mexico. But there were only a few thousand Indians left, as the rest had died from sickness brought in by the Spaniards. Now the rancho becomes important. Cattle brought from Mexico by early colonists had multiplied into the thousands. Cattle hides began to replace furs as money. The vaquero was the first cowboy to ride the brown hills of the California ranges. The sale of hides was just about California's only contact with the rest of the world. Trading was carried on between Yankee sea captains and the Padres. Hides were worth from $1 to $3. They were put aboard Yankee ships to be sent back all the way to Boston. In return, Boston traders sent needed supplies to the Californian living with his family on his rancho. Hospitality was spontaneous, and the Mexican people of California loved to dance. When a wedding was announced, all the men rode in on their horses to attend the wedding of the ranchero's daughter. It was time for a fiesta. Everyone was invited.